and July and August, the summertime stuff, he was already toast, and we were just getting into summer. But I wanted to figure out a Chinese medical way that seemed appropriate to talk to him about was obviously some signs of depression. And that's something I want to share with you all tonight, a philosophy, and this is the good stuff. This is why we're here tonight. I want to share with you all this philosophy that I think is useful. And then we're going to learn a couple other tricks, and then we're probably going to get into some questions and answers. But I drew for Scott, I drew for him this. I drew, but not this big, because I didn't have a nice big whiteboard. This, okay? Bear with me here. Let's pretend that this is colored in black, because it would take me all day to color this in black, right? So everybody recognizes this, and the English have taught us this neat way of saying yin and yang. Yin and yang. It's not yang. I think yang is not even part of the PG show. I'm not sure what a yang is, but it's yang, yin and yang. Yin and yang is absolutely a symbol that represents everything in the universe. It's inescapable. It happens in the big pictures, and it happens in the little pictures. It happens fast and it happens slow. But one thing it never does is stop. And that's what the originators of this symbol have tried to teach us, is that this is a symbol in motion. It's constantly moving. This should look like something that's constantly evolving, round and around and around. So let's talk about a couple things. Let me see if I can get rid of some of this real quick. We're going to talk about a couple of things that are both yin, and we're going to talk about yang. So let's start over here with yang. So some yang type things. Yang is hot. Yang is happy. Yang is fast. Yang is movement. Right? Qi represents a lot of yang. You can talk about qi in terms of yin as well, but the concept of qi, which we're going to have in a future talk, shows a lot of yang type characteristics. Let's look at yin. Yin is the dark side. Let me take a step back a little bit. In the original Chinese symbol of yin and yang, it was represented by the dark side of the mountain being yin and the light side of the mountain being yang. So on the light side of the mountain, there's all kinds of activity. It stays warm longer. It's greener. There's more growth. There's more death. It's constantly changing. It's exciting. It's comfortable. It's kind of happy. It's bright. These are all yang type things. On the yin side of the mountain, the dark side of the mountain, it's colder. Things come and go slower. The snow takes longer to melt. It's obviously darker, gets less sunlight. These are all the yin type things. So in our life, in our daily life, yin is obviously the opposite. It's cold, it's sad, it's slow, it's still, it's quiet, right? We could explain this to a 5-year-old. I mean, it's easy, yin and yang, very easy to get. Well, why is it important to point it out to a group of endurance athletes? What does Chinese philosophy have to do for you guys? What are you going to take home from this? Well, it's something I want to explain to you that I've observed over the past few years in working with endurance athletes. We put ourselves in a lot of artificial states that constantly evoke this. We're constantly up. And if we're not, we'll fake ourselves out in that position. You guys know the typical endurance athlete day, it's something like hello, gotta go. Do tomorrow? Okay, I'll get it. No problem. All day long, right? And then they get home and they're showering up real quick again. Maybe they'll go for another run. Maybe they'll have something quick out of the fridge. Maybe something's on TV that's really funny. Maybe they play with the kids real quick. Then they put something on TV again, and then they laugh their butts off, and then they're asleep. And then it starts all over. Day after day after day after day. Lots of yang. Well, nature has an interesting way of balancing things out. Because if you put yourself here all the time, and you don't allow yourself enough of this stuff, you will artificially be forced into here. Sorry, no choice. You will artificially be forced into a state of yin. And I think that's what's happening to Scott. Now, are there Western medical reasons to explain the blues that he has, maybe the depression? Yeah. Are there Chinese medical views? Yeah, he has spleen qi deficiency. Absolutely. But he got there from being here. Started out burning too hot and too fast in February, staying too excited, too amped up, too meticulous, too perfectionistic, go, 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 never slow, and he found himself here very quickly. Now, one thing that's interesting and is useful to someone like Scott that I explained to him is that if you are here and you're in the lowest point, guess what happens? Look what's here. You have the tail end of the good stuff. Right? So you can tell anybody, and in yourselves, if you are at the lowest of the low, the lowest point, you've never been lower than the telemarketer calls, right? No, you've never been lower, you'll find that there's a little glimmer of hope. There is that little silver lining. And I know it sounds like such a happy story, but it's very true. It's very true. The part you have to be careful about, which I've explained to a lot of folks, and I know those of you who've been in my office have heard me talk about this before, the part you have to be very careful about is artificially advancing yourself to this high yang state. Do you know where the sages live? What they say the sages, the truly wise men and women of China? Do you know where they live? They live right here at all times. They're neither too high or too low. And it's interesting, I have a lot of Chinese friends, I have Chinese teachers. If you've ever spent time with traditional Chinese people, you don't know whether they're coming or going. They're like this. And people think, God, what's wrong with that person? Why aren't they happy? You know, I'm happy, it's a great day. What's wrong with you, dude? Well, it's not necessarily that something's wrong. It's part of the culture to embrace mystery, to embrace darkness, to embrace sadness, to understand that sometimes you're cold and sometimes you're hot. So that when you get really, really up, and I'm up all the time, hi, I'm going to crash. And they've recognized this and they've embraced it, and it's part of the culture. And it's something I try to teach everybody who comes into my clinic, whether you're an endurance athlete or not. You have to embrace this stuff. You have to know that it's gonna happen. And when it happens, don't try to do stuff to make yourself happy. Don't try to do stuff to snap yourself out of it. Take time to absorb it and understand the lessons that the darkness teaches. I know it sounds so Debbie Downer and so sad, but it's true. We really have to take time to embrace the lessons that the dark times teach us. And then this will happen naturally. That's kind of how we can get through these times, is knowing that it's going to change eventually. And this is why it changes, because each contains the seed of the other. This is sort of the irritant, right? There is a little bit of yin contained within the yang and a little bit of yang contained within the yin. It's this grain of sand that is in the oyster that becomes the pearl. Because, you know, sand and oysters, it's just an irritant, and all the oyster does is build a little mucus around it that turns into a pearl. And that's how kidney stones occur too. It's pretty interesting. But this is transforming into this because these occur. And I like to call them seeds of chaos. And every one of us has a couple seeds of chaos. I've got a few. It's like an itch, you know. Everything's just great, and I feel fine, and I feel very balanced. And then my brain will go, yeah, but what about that thing you got? And what about that patient that's difficult? And what about those bills you have to pay? As soon as you find yourself getting up, there's those little voices in your head that bring you back down. And then we try to either ignore them or we try to frantically take care of them. Don't bother people, because as soon as you take care of that little seed of chaos that's you're in your yang state and you got that little booger, that little baby that's bugging you, as soon as you take care of that, boop, another one will appear. It's nature. It has to be that way. You must have that little seed of chaos in your life at all times, because if everything was perfect, we would never change. And change is what it's all about. That's our only purpose here on earth, is to change, constantly change and learn. So I explained this philosophy to Scott, and he cried and gave him a big hug, and it was all right. Everything worked out all right. I turned him on to some formulas. I have some herbal formulas that help him feel more comfortable. There were a couple. One was to help him feel a little bit up immediately, just to get him satisfied and get him comfortable. And then the other was to tonify his spleen. And I want to talk just real quickly about this, because I see a lot of spleen qi deficiency in athletes. The spleen's purpose in Chinese medicine is totally different than Western medicine. The spleen is responsible for so many functions in Chinese medicine that the Western medical docs go, well, how do they figure?